Noah, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Pretty good.
Tell me about the Penn Relays that you just got back from, right?
Penn Relays, yeah. It was a lot of fun. The 4x1 team, the 4x4 team went up, was that last week now, I think? We did all right. Our one jumper, Cam Brown, he had a really great day. He jumps 23 feet 2 inches, I think. He finished like second out of all the Americans there and like fourth overall, so that was really awesome to see.
Wow.
But yeah, it was a really great time. The other two races, we did all right. It wasn't amazing, but still pretty good job.
Nice. And so how many teams are there? I know it's probably the biggest event for track at the high school level in the country, right? All at Franklin Field, correct?
Yeah, Franklin Field. It's a lot of teams. It's a lot of American teams, and then there's also a handful of Jamaican teams that compete, and those are really fun to watch. They're also really scary to race against. Thankfully, neither of our teams raced against them, though. But it's also always awesome to see them.
Why are Jamaican teams so good? I actually I was watching some tennis tournament a couple weekends ago. Maybe it was it was either the Miami Open, I think, and Usain Bolt was there, and I was like, wow, that's a flashback.
Yeah.
Remember him? I don't know if he's running anymore, but that guy was.
He's not, no.
He was insane.
Yeah, it's always crazy. It's something in the water there. It's got to be.
Yeah. Wow. So what were those teams like?
Fast. They were really fast. They're always like, it's always a really great energy at Penn Relays. Like half of the crowd, it's a huge stadium, half the crowd is probably Jamaican, to be honest.
Really?
You know? Yeah, there's a huge Jamaican presence. You know, they bring their flags and they've got like the air horns.
Wow.
And this is really great energy, especially on like over the weekend because it runs from like Thursday to Saturday. And like Saturday is when like all the like elite athletes come in. So they'll have like the USA versus the world events. Unfortunately, we weren't there to see those this year, but those are always really fun to watch.
So do you guys stay in the city? Do you stay on Penn's campus or a little bit outside?
We stay at like a hotel that's like a little bit outside of Penn. It's like a 15-minute drive in. Yeah, not too far though.
Nice. Yeah, well, I'm from actually right outside of Philadelphia, so I've spent a decent amount of time in the city. You know, I guess recently since I've graduated college, just going in there, and I did the Penn Fellowship program, so I spent a lot of time there kind of right after college, but you got to love Philadelphia. It's a good spot.
Definitely a lot of energy there, yeah.
Yeah. So you got into track's one of the big things that you do here at Gilman and just in your life. I watched your senior speech, which was great, by the way. You talked about your headband and some of the rituals that you have. Let's just talk a little bit about your career in track and what it means to you.
Sure. So I got into track, I think probably mostly because of my older brothers. You know, they ran track and I needed a sport to do. And like I said in my speech, I'm not very coordinated. So like, I can't really dribble, you know, I'm not really like, I guess dribbling with my hands or my feet. It doesn't really work out. But track is very straightforward though, which is something I've appreciated. And it's also one of the few sports where like your effort will 100% show. It's not like if you've been working really hard, and then the game comes up and you're on the bench. Mm-hmm. Like you don't really have the opportunity to show, you know, what your work is amounted to. Mm-hmm. Track, that's not the case, which is kind of a double-edged sword a lot of times because while it is very motivating, it can also be very scary because if like you mess up and you run a bad race, there are no excuses. That's just on you. Mm-hmm. So kind of that duality has been one of the things I really enjoy about the sport where when you do well, you get to see yourself improving, but you also get to see your failures like very in your face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I like about individual sports is this, you know, whole thing that if you don't do well, the blame's on you. If you do well, you know, you can credit all of the little details that you've put into your sport. But I also like the fact that even though it's an individual sport, you still are in a group, in a team.
Yeah. That's definitely another huge draw to the sport for me is the team. The team dynamic I've had in these past years of running has been amazing. They're some of the greatest guys on the team. They're some of my best friends. Every day we start practice together, and it's always just great energy. It's great to be around them. We know how to build each other up, and we know how to, you know, hold each other accountable. Like, if you run a bad race, you know, some of your teammates will be the first one to tell you, hey, you just got rolled. You need to lock in. But they're also the first to celebrate your PRs, you know, the first to cheer you on when you're finishing a race, no matter what place you're in. So it's just a great energy to be around.
Yeah. Think about some of the most difficult sports, and I had Emmett Sherlock on the podcast, and we were talking about wrestling, which that sounds, you know, like a pretty tough sport, but track as well, you know, it's like the pain of defeat has got to be pretty heavy because it's really all on you, and you know, you put so much into it, and at the end of the day, it's you against the other people that you're running against and competing against. So it's a pretty tough pill to swallow, you know, a loss like that.
Yeah, it definitely can be. It really, really sucks just because I think, again, because track is so simple. When you like really dumb it down, you're like, wow, I really couldn't run across this like oval faster than the guy next to me could.
Mm-hmm.
And like we attach so much value to that because you think about like, there's that one Usain Bolt quote where he's like, oh, I just trained 4 years to run 9 seconds. And
right.
just like that, all of your work is over.
Wow.
It just comes to an end.
Yeah. So are you going to do some track in college, or is this your last kind of go around with the sport?
Still kind of trying to decide that. If I do, I'd have to like walk on. But I have to like look at the times for that. And then it's also going to be like a really huge commitment. You know, college sports, I don't have to tell you, takes up a lot of time, but I don't think so. I think this might be it for me.
Okay. Yeah. So you have a couple brothers, right? You have older brother. Are you the youngest?
I am, yeah. Bringing up the caboose.
Wow. So your brothers were involved in track at Gilman, all went to Gilman, correct?
Yeah.
What's it like being the youngest of 4 brothers?
Being the youngest of 4 brothers is a lot of fun.
Or 3 brothers?
Oh, yeah, sorry, 3 brothers. Yeah. 4 in total.
4 total.
It's a lot of fun. It is really... They're like trailblazers for me in a lot of aspects, whether it's like school or sports or, you know, just like things that they like or style or fashion sense. I kind of just like pick things up from them. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's like, oh, this worked well for them. Sometimes I see how things turn out for them. And I'm like, oh, let me go a different way instead. But yeah, it's really awesome to have 3 brothers, especially because like it helped me here at Gilman with like the whole idea of brotherhood. That was something that was really easy for me to buy into, just because, you know, I had such great relationships with my brothers at home, and I just wanted to extend that to my school life, which kind of like helped make Gilman home for me.
Pretty competitive in the household. I think about me and I always think birth order is so interesting. You know, like I'm the oldest of 2 sisters. One sister is just 2 years younger than me, and she was kind of right behind me, so she was pretty competitive and, you know, trying to do things that I did and do them a little bit better. And then we have a younger sister who's in 7th grade now, so it's just kind of crazy household. But youngest of 4 boys, you know, I got to think that it's pretty competitive in that household.
It is a little bit. It definitely is a little bit. Anytime I do something, I definitely make sure to rub it in my brother's face, especially if it's something that they couldn't do in their time here. But I mean, it's also pretty motivating because I guess like similar to the track team, you know, we're always there to build each other up. And, you know, if something doesn't go wrong for one of our brothers, you know, we console them and we're all there for them. But I think being the youngest especially, I have all the tools, I have all the experience. So for me, I kind of think of it as like, it doesn't make sense for me to achieve less than them since they've already like set the path for me and I know like where to go.
It was probably pretty nice coming into Gilman and, you know, knowing what to expect and knowing the ins and outs and, you know, which classes to take, which to stay away from, right?
Yeah, definitely really helpful.
So I've got a senior elective right now, and it just feels like, you know, we're at the bitter end and people are trying to get out of here and move on to the next stage of their life. But there's also this bittersweet feeling that, you know, this is the last time you're going to be at Gilman. How do you feel right now on what is today, May 3rd?
Yeah. It definitely is bittersweet. I don't know if I've really accepted it yet. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's a lot I've left unsaid to a lot of people, especially like if some of my teachers, I just need to talk to them and, you know, thank them for the year and all 4 years and, well, I guess all 7 years really, some of them. But I am also excited. I'm definitely excited to see what the future holds. I'm excited for college. I think I'm gonna have a really great summer, get to one last hurrah with my friends, I guess, before, you know, we all go our separate ways. But it is weird to think that I'll be leaving Gilman soon. I think I've spent so much of my time here since coming here. I mean, it's not odd that I'd come to Gilman, you know, probably 7, maybe 8 times a week, just because like I'm always doing something on the weekend or there's always like an event going on. There's just been so much to get involved in. And like next year, you know, I'm going to have to like seek that stuff out and, you know, make my own schedule and my own community. That's something I'm a little bit nervous about, but kind of excited, nervous, I guess. But
one thing that I loved about Harvard is they put you into a room your freshman year with random people.
Totally random.
It's kind of daunting. I remember, you know, when I was in your position looking up on Facebook at the time. I was looking up on Facebook like, oh, this kid looks a little weird. And this kid, I don't know what to expect from him. But usually, I don't know. I feel like they do a really good job of pairing you up with people that you're going to bond with. And yeah, you're not going to be super similar at first, but that's okay. You get to know each other and really grow your first year in college, and that's what it's all about. So something to look forward to.
For sure.
So speaking of bonding, you have to think track. There's a lot of failure involved. It's probably I've never done track, but it's probably pretty difficult on a day-to-day basis. You're running, you're sweating, and you're working really hard alongside this group of people. Can you just talk a little bit about like the bonding experiences that you've had in this sport here at Gilman?
For sure. I am captain of our track team, one of the captains, but I run specifically into like our mid-distance group. The track team is broken up in a few different groups. There's long-distance runners, mid-distance runners, sprinters, and there's like jumpers, hurdlers, throwers. It gets kind of broken down into subgroups. But my time with the mids, I've been them since I was a freshman. It's just really, really a whole lot of fun. That's like mid-distance family. Mm-hmm. We just get to know like Coach Deweese and now recently Coach Stanberg. We get to know them so much well. We get to know each other well. We have our own like inside jokes within mid-distance that like the rest of the team wouldn't even get. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they're always guys that I see in the hallways, and it's always fun to be around them, and like they make a difficult sport worth it. Mm-hmm. To be honest,
I think that's one of the ways that you get close with a team or just a person is that you've got to go through some painful, difficult times, whether that's a practice or failures or losses. That's how you get close. And you'd think that probably happens a lot in track, even victories. But I feel like the difficult experiences are even more, they allow you to form closer bonds with each other.
For sure. I think one thing that the coaches like to press on heavily is the whole like one team, one herd idea. So we all like are forced to take accountability for each other, especially if it's something like, say in a relay race, somebody drops the baton, and like if you drop the baton, you're DQ'd. The entire team is getting punished for that. Mm-hmm. Even at practice, if you like drop the baton practicing handoffs during practice, whole team just no questions asked, immediately just like drop and give us 10. Mm-hmm. We have to take accountability for each other because it ends up affecting ourselves, which kind of helps remind us that even though track is like very individual, we can't accomplish anything without the rest of our team.
Yeah, and it helps you form discipline. We've had a lot of conversations with the JV lacrosse team that I'm coaching this year about, someone forgets their mouth guard. That's a penalty for the entire team. So everybody gets punished for it, right? And it helps everybody feel this sense of accountability that I've got to remember my mouth guard today. I've got to, remember to bring my backup stick because my whole team is going to hurt if I mess up, if I fail to do what I need to do as an individual.
Yeah, it's definitely scary, but I mean, I think once again, just having the team with you and knowing that you're all sharing that load together just makes it so much fun.
Yeah. So mid distance, like how long are you running on a, I guess, standard day?
Mid distance workouts are races, or I guess So our races is either like 400 or 800. Sometimes if you're like a really fast guy, you might dip into a 200 a little bit. Our workouts, I'm not really sure how long. We do a lot of like rep stuff. So we're like kind of the sweet spot in between sprinters. So, we'll do a lot of short distance, like going as fast as you can, and long distance runners who go pretty much as far as they can for as long as they can. Mm-hmm. Like the name suggests, we're kind of in the middle. So we'll do called speed endurance workouts. So it's saying like how fast you can go while holding it, which I guess is kind of the main idea behind a race like the 400, which is just one lap around the track, but it's basically going almost as fast as you can for the entire lap.
Now, how important is it to, how important is like lifting and diet for a sport like this?
Super important, especially more so diet. It is not uncommon for guys to throw up at track. That's probably one of our biggest inside jokes. We like to tease one of our guys a lot. He's got a lot of stomach issues. But yeah, throw up is definitely something that's super common in practice, in meets. You'll always see there's like a trash can not a few feet from the finish line at almost any meet you go to. So diet's definitely super important. Lifting is also pretty important. I'm going to be honest, I don't lift all that much, but it's definitely important to like stay in shape and prevent injuries.
Yeah.
I think that's more so the main benefit for running. It just really helps prevent injuries and just get you stronger.
Right. Yeah. The diet question is, I think, important, because I don't think I learned until I was in college, really, how much, what I have for lunch or what I'm drinking, before a practice will affect me. And especially my energy levels. I think about, sometimes I'm at the cafeteria and I'm looking around and seeing what some people are eating. I'm like, if I ate that for lunch, I'd be so tired after, And you think if you're going from school into a difficult workout, you've got to be very thoughtful about the things that you're putting in your body.
For sure, yeah. I can tell you, I've definitely been there where I made some bad decisions at lunch, ate some flick food I probably shouldn't have, and felt it at practice, just sitting there like a rock.
I think that's good advice for, a younger athlete. I even on the JV team, I feel like I hear all the time, I just had Chipotle before this. It's like, you're going to learn the hard way, or someone with more experience is going to tell you, hey, I wouldn't do that.
And I mean, I think that's one of the things where if you really want to be good at track, you kind of have to be disciplined about that, because it's really easy to just eat whatever you want and just indulge at lunch, and then just suffer the consequences at practice. But if you really want to drop your times and do better, you have to take it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
You, every aspect of your life, basically leading up to the race, you have to be focused on and be disciplined about making sure you're putting yourself in a position to win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of details are involved. But after a race, when you're exhausted, what's kind of your go-to meal? What do you like to eat?
So my go-to meal after a race, I like to pack a little PB&J and some Gatorade. And that's just to get me through the meet, honestly, because you can nibble on it and it's not going to mess up your stomach before the race. But I've grown really fond of a just crushed up PB&J. It's
Mm-hmm.
Very endearing.
Mm-hmm.
But besides that, after the race, after I'm home and I'm relaxed, I just indulge. I eat pretty much anything I want.
Got to fuel up.
Yeah, a lot of carbs though. Love pasta.
There you go. How about nutrition bars like Cliff bars? I feel like that's probably pretty popular. Bananas prior to a race.
Yeah, bananas for sure. Love the potassium. Seizing up is not fun. It's not fun. Yeah, definitely a lot of guys do Cliff bars, energy bars. Yeah, pretty standard stuff.
Cool. All right. Well, are you still in season? Do you have any more track to run?
We do, yeah. We have our final championship meet, which is broken up into 2 days. So it's going to be next week, Thursday, and then finishing up next week, Saturday. So
I know those are long days, right? Your track events.
Pretty long, yeah. Yeah, they're usually a few hours at least. Thursdays, that's why they break it up into 2 days, but Thursdays should probably be 2.5 maybe hours.
Man, I'm continually amazed by just the commitment of, even the high school students that I observe at a high level of either a sport or the musical. I've got some students who are involved in the musical, and we just had the preview to the musical today and a couple performances this weekend. And the amount of time that, everybody is kind of putting towards what they want to do is pretty cool, because you can't really half-ass a lot of this stuff. You've got to go fully in, and, if you want to be a good track star, you've got to think about it all the time, really, your diet, your sleep, the amount of time that you're spending, after practice doing the little things. So, yeah, it's pretty awesome stuff.
It's definitely really cool to see, and I think that's one of the things that I love about Gilman is that there are just people doing so many different things. Just on the track team, you'll have guys who do traveling men, or they do tech stuff, or coding, or whatever. They're just involved in so many different things. I guess I kind of I tried to be involved in a few different things here too, but it's just really fun to see people doing things they enjoy and just dedicating themselves to it.
Yeah. So what are some other things that you're involved with on campus, or maybe some things that maybe you weren't involved with as a freshman that you've become interested in as you become an upperclassman here?
Sure. I do a lot of writing here on campus. So, I was now formerly one of the editors-in-chief on the Gilman News. I was a literary editor for Paragon, our now award-winning literary arts magazine.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot of fun. I do a lot of CIE stuff here, which is really meaningful to me. I think as a freshman, if you told me, oh, you're going to be one of the co-chairs of CIE in your senior year, I don't think I would have seen that for me. But it's something I grew into because I wanted to foster community. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe COVID might have played a role in that because, after being online learning and, not really seeing everybody, I really jumped on the opportunity to be back in person and to bring the entire community together. So that just ended up being something super
that's a
important.
tough position, following COVID, because, that's one of the reasons we started the podcast, was to do something in a time of such disconnect in the world, but especially at Gilman. And for you, leading that and helping out with the CIE at Gilman, that's got to be pretty difficult, or was difficult for you maybe.
It's definitely a little tricky sometimes. It's really gratifying work, but it's also kind of tricky to get people to buy in sometimes. For me, it's been like, how can I make Gilman more like home? But I mean, inevitably it comes a part of the job where it's like dealing with unfortunate incidences that pop up. I mean, that part of the job isn't fun, and a lot of times it's easy for like people to paint it as just like, oh, they deal with like X, Y, or Z that happened, and not as like something that's trying to celebrate people in the community.
Yeah, it's a word that you hear a lot at Gilman, is belonging and community, and there are a lot of people like you who are trying to make Gilman a place of belonging, where everyone who comes here feels like they're a part of the school. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, it's definitely been become one of my major goals here, just because I think looking back on my time here, I was definitely one of those kids that didn't immediately feel at home. But I mean, just through the year, to the people I met, the things I got involved with, I definitely learned to love and buy into what it means to be Gilman, which is like one of the cheesy things they say at like the admitted students days and all that, prospective students and admissions. But it really is true. There really is brotherhood here, and I've really come to appreciate that, and I'm definitely going to miss it.
So can you talk a little bit about how you've come to appreciate that, like that journey of, maybe you didn't really buy in at first, but some things have happened, or you realize some things in your career here that have kind of turned you into someone who would say that, be Gilman, and, you should buy into what Gilman is doing? I
think probably it starts with my teachers. In the middle school, I was really close with some of my teachers, namely Mr. Thompson. Mr. Marner was a huge influence for me. Miss Alexander, a lot of really great teachers who sort of pushed me out of my comfort zone and told me, hey, go out and try new things and meet different people. Definitely track got me more involved with the community. And I always kind of liked writing, and I think when I joined Paragon during sophomore year, because I was bored during lockdown and wanted something to do, that definitely took off for me. I started Paragon. I was quiet. I didn't really know what I was getting into. I'd done a little bit of creative writing at that point, but it wasn't like a huge thing in my life. And over the course of like going through meetings and just like reading things that people had submitted and looking at their art and getting like into their mind about like why they made this piece or why this piece was special to them, it just became a way for me to like connect with people, especially again during COVID when like we couldn't see each other face to face. And I just really fell in love with that, and it's become one of my favorite things to do here.
Wow. So what turned you on to creative writing? I know I have a few students, namely Nick Lutsky, who's very talented with creative writing. And, I kind of give him a long leash in my English class because I enjoy reading his creative pieces. And we've been doing some free writes where I'm just like, you can write about whatever you want. And Nick, he takes it as creatively as he wants, which I'm okay with because that's kind of his style. That's what he likes to do. And he does really good work. Yeah, but how about for you? Like, how did you really get into creative writing? It's kind of a hard, it's tough to break into, I think. You have to be inspired by it. You've got to have a literary mind in some ways. You've got to enjoy reading and seeing what good creative writing looks like, and have the time to experiment on your own.
Yeah, it's definitely a little tricky to get into, and I think, like I said, if not for COVID and not joining Paragon, I don't think I really would have gotten into it as much as I have. But I've always kind of liked writing. That's why I did like news stuff and stuff like that. But I think learning how to write creatively was something new for me because, I'm at that point as a sophomore, I'm used to writing essays and, articles in the news. But learning how to like just make something entirely new, make a story, but like still have it be meaningful. That was something that I just thought was really cool. Like I saw the ways that people would talk about their lives or about, comment on things they see in society that are just really interesting. And they made it like creative, and they were able to do it. And I think I've also fallen in love with it recently because I took AP Spanish literature this year. And so it kind of like branched out from like, not just English, but like looking at literature from other cultures and learning their history and, sort of how people view the world. I just thought it was really, really interesting to see that like, people can't say everything. so they have to write it down, which is something that I can relate to. And like the things that they choose to write about end up reflecting the world around them. And I just thought that was a really interesting idea.
Yeah. And your college essay you shared with me, I appreciate you for doing that, because I emailed a ton of seniors and I only got a few back. But I'm trying to help my my junior class think a little bit about that in advance, because when you're in your Septembers and Octobers of next year and you have to write all these supplemental essays, I think they'll be glad that they've done some practice and kind of know what good ones look like. So could you talk a little bit about your college essay and your process for writing that? Because I thought it was really good.
Sure. So for my college essay, the one that I did for the Common App, I just kind of wanted to talk about my life a little bit. And I didn't want it to be like a super like, oh, this has been the moral of my life this far and this is what I'm going to do. I just wanted to be honest, which I think is something that a lot of readers appreciate, is like leveling and being legitimate and genuine. I also wanted to be a little bit creative, so instead of just saying instead of a diary of like, this is what happened in my life, then this, then this, then this, I would kind of go off into tangents a little bit. So like I'd bring something up, maybe talk about what that meant to me, maybe introduce a few characters, describe it a little bit, and then find a way to like loop it into the next point I wanted to talk about. But I think specifically about my essay, I was really writing about my transition during middle school. So coming in 6th grade from being homeschooled and going to a small public school in Hawaii, of all places, and jumping into Gilman, and what that was like, and sort of getting used to that.
Yeah, I forgot you mentioned that during your senior speech, that you had spent some time in Hawaii.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Or
do you remember too much about that?
I do, actually. That was later on in my life. That was like elementary school.
Okay.
So my dad was in the military, and we bounced around every 3 years or so when I was younger. But they were originally from Maryland, which is why we're back here now. But right before he came out of the Army, his last station was in Hawaii. So we spent 3 years there. That was when I first started going to school, because prior to that I was in homeschool. So it was definitely something to get used to there, because the public schools there, it's like I was still like a minority of sorts, but like in the sense that like I'm a minority surrounded by other people of color. Just because it was just so many, Pacific Islanders and so many Japanese people. I still wasn't used to like being a minority in like a predominantly white institution, which was what made coming to Gilman a little bit odd. But Hawaii was just really great. It was a great community there. I lived in a nice neighborhood. As soon as we moved in, within like 3 days, some of the neighborhood kids knocked on our door and they're like, "Hey, we want to meet the new guy. Come out and play." And that was really awesome, because I was a pretty shy kid, and I would never be the kid to do that, to go to somebody else's house and knock on their door and say, "Hey, come outside and let's go run around and do some stupid stuff."
That's pretty awesome.
But yeah, that was definitely great.
I feel like that's so important for kids to have a neighborhood where they have kind of a crew that they play with and run around with. My younger sister used to do that a ton in our neighborhood with the little kids, but these phones, man, the phones and computers, and it's so hard to... Now everyone's kind of inside, which is sad, but it's just the world,
Yeah, and I mean, I think people are finding ways to like bring those two worlds together. So, you might be inside, but you're maybe like talking to your friends versus via like a FaceTime or something, or maybe you're playing a game together on Discord. But I do think there is still something to be said for like meeting up in person and just not having a plan and going out and doing something entirely stupid.
Playing with a stick in the backyard, or skipping rocks.
Yeah.
There's something pretty cool about that. I used to play my neighbor growing up, this girl, Megan Quinn. She was probably 6'2" in middle school. Wow. She was very tall and loved basketball. And I was pretty competitive growing up, so I always wanted to beat her in basketball. And she was a year or two older than me, and we would have epic one-on-one basketball games in her driveway. And, the lady next door was kind of sitting in her living room, and she would watch every day after school. She would lean out the window and say, "Oh, that was a foul." And I rarely beat her in basketball. She went on to play Villanova basketball, and she could play. But
that's pretty serious.
It's kind of fun, to have at least someone in your neighborhood that you could just do something like that with. And
yeah.
I think it helps you grow up a little bit.
That was definitely one of the things I was thinking about in Hawaii. That was my first experience having like a community, because, being a military kid, we jumped around every 3 years, so I never really got to like dig in and have my roots somewhere. And I was thinking about like how my life might have been different had I just been born like in Maryland and just grew up in a neighborhood in Maryland and got to know, the people around, and I went to the same school as everybody, and just got to know the people in the area.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was thinking about that because that's how my parents grew up. That's what their childhood was like. And I don't think I missed out necessarily. I just think it was a different way of growing up. And it's just interesting to think like, this is what my life maybe could have been like, instead of just like having a few years of that and then coming to Maryland, which is, again, an entirely new place.
So you came here in 6th grade.
6th grade, yeah.
So that was a pretty difficult I assume moving from Hawaii to a new school and trying to make friends in 6th grade, which is a tough time in, I think, everybody's
it's an awkward sort of year. 6th grade is an awkward sort of year. The transition definitely was a little rough. Again, there were great people here who made it better. But initially it was weird. It was weird. I think I have to credit maybe the 6th grade sleepover, which is a thing that they do in the middle school, to like the first time I actually made friends, just because I was being silly, and I just wore like this really weird like Sesame Street shirt. It was like, I don't remember what it said, but it was like it was something along the lines of everything I know, like I learned from the streets, and it had like Elmo and like Big Bird on there. And it was I think it was James Stevenson maybe who walked up to me and was like, "Hey, that's a funny shirt." And then since then, we just started talking, and I got to know my classmates better. But yeah, initially it was definitely a little awkward.
Yeah, I think one really good thing about Gilman is they have a lot of these programs embedded in the yearly calendar that give students, whether you're in 6th grade or you're a freshman, the freshman Outward Bound, or the senior retreat. Like, there are a lot of different things that you can do, and you have to do that. Yeah, they're not like the most educational, quote unquote, sitting in the library reading a book kind of thing. It's like, no, you're with people and you're getting to know people, and maybe in a group with some new people that you might not have gotten to know before or really talked to before. Yeah,
they're definitely good about, throwing different people into different scenarios. And I think that was the main focus of senior retreat, which was really fun to help plan. I'm glad I did that. That was really fulfilling. But yeah, it definitely helped bring the grade together. And I think especially it's planned at such a great time where, you just finish sending in your early applications. And so as a grade, you kind of take a breath before getting ready for a regular decision. But yeah, senior retreat was really great.
Yeah, so I went to senior retreat my first year here at Gilman, which was now, I think, 4 years ago. And I couldn't really get into it because I didn't really know what it was about. I was new. It was different than anything I was ever used to before, and I was so close in age, I felt like, at the time, to everyone there. So it was weird for me to get the feel of like adult versus, a lot of the people there were, I don't know, 3-4 years younger than me. So I couldn't find the right balance then. So I don't really have the greatest sense of like how powerful that experience is for students at Gilman. So maybe you could talk a little bit about just the senior retreat and what it's like and why it's so important for a lot of people. I know I've heard so many people talk about how great it is.
I think the best thing about senior retreat is that, again, you can just be completely honest. There are no filters. There's no dividing lines. You're in a group with a couple of your classmates, a couple of your peers. Maybe they're guys you don't know too well. Maybe they're guys you had a few conversations to. You maybe say hi to them in the hallways, maybe not. But you really get to talk to them about anything you want, anything in your life. You get to look at your life and see how that's going. You get to talk about their lives and see how that's going. But also, like, your faculty person too. You get to know more about them. And I think definitely there are so many teachers at Gilman with just like really interesting lives that you would just never get to know about outside of the classroom. So I think that's probably the greatest thing about senior retreat is that, like, it's just an opportunity to get to know people better and to talk about things that are meaningful and important to you, which means a lot. It means a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting. Cesare showed me a senior speech last week because he's got all the senior speeches available from this guy Rishi, and Rishi talks about his I guess theme of his senior speech is curiosity, and in the speech, he just takes questions from the audience. He's like, I'm opening up the floor for questions. And the questions that people ask are hilarious or really profound. But one of the questions was about, like, you know, if you could ask somebody a question at Gilman, what would you ask them? And he says, or something along the lines of that. And he says, I wish I asked my teachers kind of more questions about their lives and their experiences, because I think when you're in high school, you focus so much on the curriculum and like, oh, when is this due? And how many points is this out of? And what's my grade, right? Yeah. Naturally, because you're trying to get through and you're trying to get the grades and you're trying to go off. But I think in retrospect, when you're a senior and beyond, you're like, wow, these teachers here are actually, you know, they've had lives outside of just this classroom. I know it's crazy to believe, but they've had experiences and different things they've done. And I kind of wish I asked them, you know, some more questions about those experiences in their lives, which can teach you just as much as any book could, you know?
Yeah. There are so many cool people at Gilman. So many cool people. And they have like such diverse interests too, where it's like there's already so much to get involved in on campus, but I'm 100% certain if you just talk to your teachers about anything you're interested in, you'll probably find somebody else who shares a similar interest or knows somebody who shares a similar interest, and you can just talk to them about that or get involved with that too.
Yeah. So, all right, let's think what else. We've got track cover. We've got a little bit about the Gilman experience. What else? What else is on your mind today?
What else is on my mind? I guess I can talk a little bit about things like mentoring program, which is something I've tried to do. I haven't done a great job of it. It's like trying to work with younger Gilman students, and like specifically the mentor program pairs you up with like a lower schooler or middle schooler. And that's something that I've tried to do. I haven't really been great with it just because, you know, I've been busy or I just have been bad about making time. But it is something that I like, which is like talking to younger guys, especially as I'm about to leave Gilman. I think, like, I look at the freshman class and I'm like, wow, was I like that? That was me a few years ago. And it just seems like forever ago. But here I am about to leave, and it just went by in the blink of an eye. And I feel like, oh, I need to tell them everything and like make sure they're good to go. But I also want to like just let them figure things out. And I also don't really feel like talking to them right now. And it's just like a weird jumble of like things I feel like I have to say before I leave versus things that like I don't really need to say versus things I feel like saying. But
to the younger students.
Yeah, because I want everyone to have like a great experience here as I did. And I guess that's also part of my work with CIE. But I don't know, just coming to terms with like Gilman is going to be a different place, and it already is a different place right now. But especially I think this year, just there's so much change going on, so many teachers, you know, retiring, so many new people coming in, so many, even things like apparently the track is getting redone over the summer, which is a little bittersweet because like it needs to be redone, but does it have to be while I'm leaving?
Right.
Like when I'm never going to run on it again. But yeah, it's just coming to terms with like Gilman coming into a new identity as I'm getting ready to leave it. Just been a little bit weird.
Yeah. Let me ask you, if you know, are to leave Gilman and look back in 10 years, what's one thing or one or two things about the place that you hope are the same and don't change?
That's a good
10
question.
years, maybe 20 years, you know,
years,
whenever in the future, you look back at Gilman and you hope these couple things still exist. Other than Path to Follow podcast, what else needs to be continuing to move forward here?
I'll say first, I think they've made great progress, but they can't let their foot off the gas with Flick lunches. We've seen definitely improvements. They've come a long way. But don't stop here. Keep going. Keep pushing for better lunches. Another thing is probably the brotherhood. I mean, don't stop being brothers. Don't stop being a class. I think the class of 23 is definitely really close-knit. There are a lot of guys that I'm going to miss. There are a lot of guys who, you know, even if we're not super close, just without question, we're there supporting each other, whether it's like a game or a musical or, you know, some kind of performance or whatever. Gilman guys have a great way of showing up and showing out for each other. So, yeah, I think that's definitely something I'd like to come back and see, people just being supportive and people fostering brotherhood.
I like that a lot. Now, how about if you're talking to a freshman or a sophomore, what's one thing that they should, I guess, direct their attention on as they get ready to be an upperclassman? Because I think it's so important for seniors to set the tone for the younger classmen. I think that's important on a team. I think that's what culture is, when the seniors and the juniors and the upperclassmen have expectations for what a place or a program looks like and should be like, that the younger kids look up to. And then by the time that they're a senior, it looks like that, but maybe it's even better in some ways, because you could think about it in terms of like you as the youngest of 4 boys, you're coming up and you've observed your brothers and you've watched what they've done, and now you're a senior and you've really internalized a lot of kind of their trailblazing, right, to leave your own legacy behind at Gilman. So, what do you think freshmen or sophomores need to do, or opportunities they need to take advantage of here, so by the time they're seniors, the culture of Gilman is even stronger?
I think definitely branch out. Don't necessarily limit yourself to just like 1 or 2 things. And I mean, by all means, you should definitely find those like few things that you're like genuinely interested in that you want to pursue. But I mean, there's no shame in like trying out a new club and maybe it's not for you, and you decide that after like a few weeks of trying it out, or going out for a different sport or trying out for the musical. Just like try new things. Don't establish something in your freshman year and just stay with that for all 4 years just because you feel like you have to. There's definitely a lot of space to move around in Gilman, and I think trying new things and branching out and talking to new people and meeting new people and finding out what's important to them is really helpful to find what's important to you. I'm undecided about my major right now. I don't really know what I want to go into specifically, but one of the things that I find really awesome is talking to people who like are very passionate about, I want to be an engineer, or I want to do this, that, or the third, and listening to them speak about why. They just like, you talk to somebody and you see their eyes light up and it's like, oh wow, this is something that this guy's really into. And even in my least favorite class here, which I have to be honest is probably calculus, just like seeing the guys in the class that are like genuinely in love with math is really cool to see. Like you see their gears turning, you see it click for them, you see them get it, you see them ask questions, and it's like, wow, I want to find something like that works for me one day.
Yeah.
It's just really cool to see.
How about your favorite class or subject here?
Ooh.
I know it's tough, but
it is a little tough. I think probably a tie between English and Spanish because of, like I said, I'm really enjoying Mr. Zealand's AP Spanish Lit class this year. And then also just English because I like books. I think we've had.
What English classes have you taken?
This year I took Mr. Baker's American Lit since the 60s class. We read some good books in there. I had Miss Knapp in sophomore year. Freshman year I had Mr. Malkus, and then junior year I had English at Roland Park. That did not go well. That was not a good English class.
So you've liked your Gilman English classes.
For sure.
Mr. Baker's class is interesting to me since the 60s.
It is.
What did you read in that class?
We read The Bell Jar. We read Cat's Cradle. We read The Fire Next Time, and a few other things I can't remember right now. But he does a good job of painting a pretty good picture of what life was like in the 60s. And, Mr. Baker being the huge music guy that he is, he incorporates a lot of the music into it too. So it's nice to see like this is how people were expressing themselves in the 60s. It just like, it seems like a more, I don't want to say accurate, but just like genuine way to view history, to see like how people felt instead of just like reading like, oh, these are the things that happened, like the dates and times and events. But I should also say that Mr. Baum's history class, because I took Mr. Baum's American history since the 60s, seeing that paired with Mr. Baker's English class and like having like the hard facts and how people responded to those and like how people were expressing themselves at the same time, that was really awesome to see like how those two classes coincided. And that's been something that was really fun all year.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm teaching U.S. history next year. I just had my first U.S. history meeting this morning, so nice. I'm excited. I'm a little. It's daunting to figure out how to fully teach, U.S. history in 1 year. There's so many different choices you can make and ways you can structure the timeline that I don't know. It's going to be interesting, but I'm excited for it.
Yeah. That was definitely a fun class I had last year. I had Mr. Baum last year too, and That was a great class. So I don't know. I'm not going to claim to know how to teach history, but I think you can't go wrong if you talk to Mr. Baum for some tips.
Yeah. Cool. So let's get to your book, Rec, that you have here.
So this is How Do You Live by an author named Genzaburō Yoshino. It's a Japanese book. It was translated pretty recently, I think like last year, maybe 2 years ago. It's not like my favorite book in the world. I read it pretty recently, though. I think maybe last summer. It's about this kid, and he's talking to his uncle about, like, oh, how do you live? I think it's a pretty solid middle school read, just because, like, it's this kid who's, you know, looking inward and looking at his life and thinking about what's important to him and how to live in, like, as, like, an ethical person. And, like, his uncle sort of fills him in on that. It's apparently pretty popular amongst, like, young Japanese people. It says, like, in the front cover, Hayao Miyazaki, the guy behind a lot of the Studio Ghibli movies, it's like it was one of his favorite books growing up, and I think it said he's planning to do like a movie on it soon. So yeah, I think it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat.
What is the title all about?
So it's called How Do You Live, and the kid, he's trying to figure out, you know, what it means to be alive. Essentially, he's like in middle school and he's making friends, and you know, he's seeing how they live. He's friends with like super rich kid who has to like, you know, work to support his family so he can make it to school all the time. He's kind of somewhere in the middle. He lost his dad. It doesn't really go into a whole lot of detail about how or why, and he's coming to terms with his relationship with his mom and his uncle, who's sort of filling the father figure role for him. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's pretty funny. It's like, it's interesting to read from like a high school perspective, because you look back and you're like, oh yeah, that sounds like me. That sounds like things I was doing when I was a middle schooler, which is pretty cool to see, because this is a book written from like 1940, maybe something like that, maybe 30s. And yet I'm still connecting with this Japanese middle schooler from like thousands of miles away and like all these decades ago, and yet we're still having experiences that are like pretty similar.
Oh, that's awesome.
Pretty cool to see.
Cool. Well, I'd love to check that out. I've got enough books out of the Gilman Library out right now, but they are getting rid of a ton of books, which is kind of sad.
Yeah. I was in there the other day. Andrew Kang, he kind of like dragged me in. He's like, hey, they're getting rid of a lot of books. Just come grab one and take it. So I have like 4 or 5 in my bookshelf now.
Yeah.
But
I don't feel bad about the books. I've got like 25 books out, which is a lot, which is kind of ridiculous. But I don't feel bad because they're just trying to get rid of them anyway. So
yeah.
Cool. Well, I like this title of this book. I'll give that a read, hopefully this summer. Just some thoughts for you as you get ready to go to Harvard. One thing that we've talked a lot about today on the podcast is, you know, relationships and belonging and getting to know people. And freshman year at Harvard, I think the dining hall, Annenberg Dining Hall, which is a beautiful dining hall right next to where you'll live next year, is the best place to get to know each other, I think, especially your freshman class, because only freshmen eat in there. And my friends, I played lacrosse, and a lot of my teammates would give me a lot of crap because they're like, he's always in the dining hall. He loves the dining hall. But I just thought the place, not only the food's all right. It's decent. It's not, you know, it's better than Flick, I think. You'll be pleasantly surprised. But the people you meet in there are so cool, you know, and your book title kind of reminds me of this idea. And just talking to you, I think it's so important in that freshman year to really branch out and talk to as many people as you can, because I still keep in touch and I'm friendly with, and will go visit people that I just got close with from sitting down with them in Annenberg. So that's a lot to look forward to for you, that, you know, people from all over the world and all over the country, you'll become pretty close with next year. And freshman year is so important. That's why I felt so bad for the COVID classes, because they didn't get that physical experience of being in a place like that. So pretty awesome for you.
I'm excited. I'll definitely keep that in mind. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on making the decision. And Noah, thank you for coming in today. It's been a fun conversation.
Thanks for having me. This has been really great.